Alright, welcome back to Sandwell, where we're talking all things mechanical, where today we're talking about humidifiers and keeping your house healthy during the wintertime. So, first, I want to talk about, do I need a humidifier? How do I know I need a humidifier? Why should I need a humidifier? And these are questions I get asked all the time whenever I'm in somebody's house. And actually, a lot of times the questions are kind of prompted from the homeowner asking me, I feel like my house is dry. I feel like my system's running all the time. Is there any way that I can help my, help my house out to, feel better? And that conversation starts with a tool called a psychrometer. Okay, I'll run out to the truck and I'll grab a psychrometer, and with this tool I can measure a lot of different things, but mainly I'm looking at the humidity of the house. And it's not uncommon to see the humidity of your house drop off in the wintertime whenever it's cold and dry outside. We've got kind of two things happening there. It's cold outside, it's dry outside, and with that, we're running our furnace, we're running our heat pump, we're running whatever, and it's just drying the air out. Whenever those furnaces are running, they are just drying the air just constantly. So what you'll start to see is you'll start to notice that your your skin is dry. You'll notice that you can turn a light on 3 feet away with the static discharge from the tip of your finger. You will notice that if you live in a log house like this one here, you may start to see the wood actually crack and gaps start to form in between the chinking or the log layers. So those are good starts to a conversation about humidity, and I would verify it with a psychrometer. So have your service technician pull out their psychrometer. If they don't have one, then, well, I don't know. So I like to go throughout the house and take a few different readings. Okay, I'm also going to take a look at the reading at the return. That gives me a good idea of how much humidity is in the air as it's entering the furnace. I'll also take a humidity reading at the supply trunk, so either directly at the furnace or at a few of the supplies. But I want to get a few of those readings. So as I stand here right now, we are in the mid-30s on our relative humidity, which isn't bad because it is, I think, 17 degrees outside today. So that's that would be a conversation to have with your service technician. And if you feel that you need to have a humidifier, there's a few things that we want to make sure before we just haphazardly go and order a humidifier off of Amazon, have it shipped to the house and installed. We want to look at a few different things, such as, do we physically have room for a humidifier? Where is the equipment located? Is it in the attic? Is it in the basement? Is it in a crawl space? Is it in a closet? The reason we want to know that, I don't want to stick your humidifier in a location where it is apt to freeze. Or if it's up in your attic, if there is, or when there is a water issue, is there a potential that it will destroy a ceiling? These are things you want to know going into it. And that all kind of helps determine what humidifier you're going to be looking at. But first, what I've got here behind me, I'm going to get you in here a little bit closer, is a fun little chart that I have been playing with for years. I love these charts. This is what's called a psychrometer chart, and it is the very first step that I look at whenever I'm talking humidifiers. How big of a humidifier do I need? I'm going to this chart. So I have another video that really goes into depth with this thing, but with this, your service technician should pull this out, and they should look at the temperature of the house at the return, the supply, and essentially go across this chart to see how many grains of moisture that we need to add into the airstream, okay, in order to get us to our desired humidity level, whether that be 30%, 40%, 50%. So, and everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's house is a little bit different. I do not want to put a huge humidifier into a house that is very drafty, or a house that has big heat losses, because what can happen is, if you look across this chart here, let's just hypothetically say that we stick a humidifier that is too big into a house. If we are shooting for this 70-degree temperature here, at 50, maybe 60%. If it's too big, it's putting too much moisture in the air. Let's say we're getting up to 60%. We could look across here horizontally to the right to see how many grains of moisture are in the air per pound. Or if we go to the left here, we actually can look at our dew point. Okay, and so at 70 degrees, 60%, our dew point is going to be somewhere around 55. Okay, 55 degrees. So what that means is, any object in your house that is 55 degrees or colder has the potential for condensation to form on it, whenever we are up to that 60% humidity. And that is an issue, because now we're talking about mold, we're talking about mildew, we're talking about stink, we're talking about rotting away windowsills and things like that. So we don't want to put too big of a humidifier into a house. Likewise, we don't want to put too small of a humidifier into a house, because your humidifier ideally is only going to be running whenever your HVAC equipment is running. Okay, so I don't want to have to run the thermostat in the on position in order for it to actually maintain humidity. If we have too small of a humidifier, and the humidifier is sized that in order to maintain 40%, it has to run 24/7. Well, that means our blower has to be running 24/7, which we don't want, because now any little bit of gains that we've got out of adding humidity, we are just throwing money out the window, because we're running our blower all that much longer. So it's ideal that we obviously size these things correct. So make sure your technician is using this chart, and they're nice little charts to have. I keep a few of these on the truck with me, just that I can just throwaway ones that I can color on, and really jot some notes down whenever I'm talking to a homeowner. So moving forward, where do we want our humidity? Let's say I go into a house and I'm finding that it is 20% relative humidity inside the house at the return. Walking around the rooms, it's obvious it's likely going to be a lot lower than that at the supply, if we're burning a hot temperature, oil furnace, natural gas, something like that. But let's say we're at 20%, 25%. What's the drawbacks to having low humidity? Well, if we look at this chart here, we can see a bunch of different things which can crop up, whether it's low or high humidity. And if we're too dry, or if we're too high on the humidity, too moist of a zone, what we can have. You see, we can have bacteria growing if it's too low, or if it's too high. We can have viruses, we can have fungus, we can have mites. Okay, mites really do well in high humidity. So we want to stay in this healthy zone here, because as you can see, we although we're not going to totally take away everything, this is your ideal zone. Okay, somewhere between 30 to 60%. I like to say 40% is a good average. 40 to 50, that's a good range. So that's where I want to stay. But with this chart is just kind of a little snapshot of the whole thing. And the reason I say that is because all of these conditions, bacteria, viruses, fungus, mites, all that, they are temperature dependent. Okay, so whenever you get down to 30 degrees, freezing, many of this won't matter, okay? It could be a very humid climate or it could be a very dry climate. When you're below freezing, a lot of bacteria are not going to want to grow. It's hard for them to survive. And this is a good image here to kind of illustrate that, although it is from the UK or somewhere of that nature. This is all Celsius, but it still gives you just a good idea, okay? Where if ideally at 70 degrees, 65, 70 degrees, we're in here, okay? You can see this is our nice healthy range. The colder we get, a lot of these things are not going to grow, okay? Likewise, the higher we get up over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, your molds are not going to grow. Even if it's a mold, an M-O-U-L-D, they won't grow. M-O-L-D won't grow either. Same stuff. But this is just a good, I guess, picture to kind of illustrate that point. So this is where we want to be. We want to be right here in the middle. If we go back to our psychrometric chart, okay, this is where we want to be, right in the middle. Somewhere between 65, 75 degrees, 30 to 50%, right in here. Okay, this is where I shoot to have my zone. Okay, now every home's going to be different, and that's kind of what you have to interview, I guess, whenever we're looking at system replacement or adding humidity control devices into a house. So that's that. I guess moving forward, whenever we're looking at humidifiers themselves, there's a few different kinds of humidifiers. Okay, we can have a drum style humidifier, which I haven't seen in quite some time. I mean, I see them from time to time on older installs, but I really don't see them being installed new. And essentially what they are is a big huge foam drum which rotates around in a bath of water, okay? And the air blows across that drum. It introduces humidity into the air, and all is well. These were the hot thing back in the early 90s, back in the 80s. I saw a lot of these from that time era being installed. Like I said, I don't see a lot of them now, but they were effective. They did their job. That's not to say that they aren't good, but there's other ways of doing it now that we find to be a little bit better. Anyway, with these, if you have one on your furnace already, just make sure it's clean, okay? You could maybe put a little bit of bleach inside. You can pop this metal cover off, put a little bit of bleach in that basin just to kind of rinse it out, get any fungus and nasty growth, algae that forms in there, flushed out. But that's your first type. It's called a drum humidifier. Moving on, we have a standard bypass humidifier. Okay, these are called bypass humidifiers because they essentially bypass the house to provide air to this thing. And what you've got, and I actually have one here that we're going to be installing tomorrow. I'm going to walk you through that installation. But these bypass humidifiers, regardless of the brand, this happens to be a Clean Comfort brand humidifier. Regardless of the brand, they're all about the same. They do the same thing. Okay, they have a panel of water that they have a panel inside of this humidifier housing. That water trickles down across. The air blows through that. You've got humidity in your air. There are a few features to this unit that I like over some of the other ones, like the Scuttles, or the April Air model. And one of those is that, and I installed an April Air. I installed an April Air humidifier last week, and I did notice that with the April Air, as opposed to this one, I know that the bypass door here on the other models, this one has a very positive engagement, okay, whether it's open or closed. You can just feel it just click right into place. So there's no chance for it to accidentally creep open in the air conditioning mode, which you definitely don't want. So that's one thing I do like about this. It has a really good positive engagement, okay, whether it's open or closed. Also, I don't know if you're able to see, but it is clearly marked summer where it's closed, winter when it's open, okay? So whenever we put this thing into the winter, it is open, it is allowing humidity to go in. A lot of the other brands, they don't have that. They may say open or closed, and I get asked all the time, hey, should this thing be open or should it be closed? I don't know. The nice thing with this is, you know, if it's summer or if it's winter, easy. So I do like that with this. I guess another thing is that the Clean Comfort has these buttons, both top and bottom, that you will simply push, and that top cover pops right off. Some of the other brands, they have a thumb screw on the bottom that is, you know, it gets rusty and dirty and it gets a little bit hard, so sometimes you need a screwdriver. You don't always have a screwdriver. Most people have at least 2 fingers that they can open this thing up with. So, pardon me because I wish it was installed on something, but push down on the top and bottom and this cover will pop right off. So, I'm going to take the cover off, set it aside. Let's take a look at the inside. So there's the guts of this thing. These things are very primitive. There's not much going on in here. Another good thing with this Clean Comfort one is that whether it's installed where the air is coming in from the right or if it's coming in from the left, we can take this piece off of here, okay, and we can flip it around and it locks right onto the other side there, so we can bring our ductwork around this side. So the idea here is that the humidifier itself, we would hang onto the ductwork, and then the air would come off of the supply trunk, okay, or the return. Some manufacturers will specify that it has to go on the return or it has to go on the supply, and some they don't specify either way. So regardless, we've got our ductwork coming in, it's blowing air across this panel, and it's introducing it into the system. That's what this is for. So whether it's on the right or left, we can do that with this. So the nice thing is we don't have to know that ahead of time. We can stock these things, have them ready to go. Now inside of here, we've got this water panel. Okay, this is it's almost like a metal panel that they spray with a mineral spray. That helps hold the water in place as it, you know, as the air is blowing across. That way it's not just totally wasting everything. And the water will be sitting on the very top of this, okay, and it just kind of trickles down across that pad. And it works its way out to the bottom here to a drain. Right here, there we are. To this drain. This is our water fill valve, okay, or our solenoid. Your water will come into here and feeds up this black tube on the back side, and that's how we fill that top chamber up. But anyway, on the drain side, it is important, very, very, very important, that if this is being drained into a condensate pump, that condensate pump is not being directly piped to the outside, okay? I've seen this many times where your humidifier will go into a condensate pump. That condensate pump goes out the foundation wall, and then I get a call in the middle of December, January, when it's 5 degrees outside, where you've got a mess in the basement. And the reason is that little tiny vinyl hose that sticks out the foundation is frozen solid. Okay, it's not an issue in the air conditioning mode, you know, but this thing's going to be producing water all winter long, and we don't want that water to freeze. So this has to go into a drain in the basement, floor drain, sump pit, something like that. If it is going into a condensate pump, that condensate pump has to be dumping somewhere where it will not freeze. Okay, so be mindful of that. Also, on the 1/4 inch water fill side, you can use plastic, you can use copper, however you want to do that, that's fine. So again, some manufacturers will specify that it has to come off of the hot water side. Okay, you have to have hot water feeding these things. And I don't necessarily, I don't say I don't agree with that, but I noticed that on humidifiers that are feeding with hot water, by the time that it leaves the hot water tank, travels across the basement, hits this, the water hitting this valve is not much hotter than your cold water supply is anyway. Okay, it doesn't run that much water to maintain heat. It's just a trickle of water. By the time it hits this valve, it's cold. Okay, it's cold water. So I wouldn't waste running your hot water to feed these things if you could avoid that. But that's really your bypass humidifier in a nutshell. These bypass humidifiers have the capability of producing anywhere from 12 to almost 20 gallons per day of moisture, which is that's a lot of moisture, 20 gallons. But sometimes you need more. Sometimes you need more water than that. And that kind of brings us to our next one, okay? These are very similar to the bypass humidifier, but it isn't a bypass humidifier because it doesn't have that bypass tube. It actually has a fan built in the front where it's going to be drawing air from your equipment space. Okay, so be mindful of that if your furnace is installed in the garage. Okay, we don't want to be using one of these because it's going to be drawing air from the garage and dumping it into the house, potentially carbon monoxide or freezing cold garage air. But the benefit to these is that, one, the installation can be a little more compact. You know, if we're really tight on space for running that bypass tube, it's nice to have this as an option. Also, a lot of times across different manufacturers, these models here will have a higher gallons per day rating on them. Okay, whereas the bypass humidifier that I just showed you, I think that one is a 12 gallon per day. A lot of times you can get up over 18, 20 gallons per day with these ones. So if we have a large home that needs a tremendous amount of water in the air, this is a good place to go to look for that. So that's really, I guess, your third humidifier type. And then finally, we got these guys. Okay, these are a whole different thing in themselves, where this is a steam humidifier. Okay, now what this does is we've got a vat of water down here. We've got several sensors, heating elements, and they generate steam and it dumps it right into your airstream. Okay, so these things produce a tremendous amount of steam. They do phenomenal. So if you've got a house that needs to have steam and it needs to have it now, and you don't want to pull air from the pull air from a closet, pull air from the garage, or you don't have the blower capacity to bypass, this is a good alternative. Now, the thing with these is they're about double the price of a bypass humidifier, and that's nothing. The big thing with these is that if you don't have good water going into them, they're going to clog up, they're going to fail. There's a bunch of sensors in there that get calcium deposits on them. The heating element will just get corroded with calcium. I've seen a lot of issues with not necessarily this brand, but all of the brands. So a lot of the manufacturers have really worked out some of these bugs, but that's something to be mindful of. We're talking a steam humidifier, which is 2 times the price of a traditional bypass humidifier, but then we also need to put some sort of water conditioning in line with this so that we're feeding it nice, clean water, at minimum filtered water, so that that's not an issue. Okay, so that's really our 4 types of humidifiers that we would be installing in your house. Okay, so it's regardless of what humidifier you end up installing, okay, one thing that your technician needs to do, because I've seen this, and make sure that they do it. Whenever this thing is installed, if you have sheet metal ductwork, great. You can put that thing on the sheet metal ductwork, screw it in, seal it up, you're good to go. If you've got fiberglass duct board on your supply or your return plenum or wherever this thing is being mounted, make sure that that technician has put in a sheet metal backing plate on that duct board, because I have seen where the weight of these things, when they get full of water, over time they will start to fall off of that fiberglass, and now you've got your humidifier on the floor, you've got a little tiny 1/4-inch hose just kind of squirting water everywhere, and now it's a call to the insurance company. So we want to avoid that. Make sure that this thing is secured. Regardless of which one you end up going with, just make sure it is mounted on that ductwork in a way that it will not come off. Okay, so that's really the big thing there. This is just another picture that I had come across about, mold. I want to make that just very, very clear. These things, if they are not maintained, if they're not cleaned, if they have been put out of service, okay, and not like officially condemned where they're actually disconnected, these things become a breeding ground for mold. Okay, actually the one we're doing tomorrow is we are replacing a moldy humidifier, one that was put into a system years ago. The house was sold, somebody else bought it, didn't know it was there, didn't know how to use it, and it just is infested with black mold. So if you see what creates mold, everything that's in a humidifier. I mean, we are just perfect for creating mold. So I don't want to scare you away from a humidifier, because these things are phenomenal at creating a healthy environment. Last thing we want to do is be somewhere on the end here, because we're afraid of putting a humidifier in. Okay, we don't want to be down here, because now look at all these issues that we could, respiratory infections, asthma, okay, ozone production, viruses, bacteria, all this stuff that forms down here and in to drive a situation. I don't want to scare you away from that, and now you're dealing with all these other things. Just, if you get a humidifier, make sure it's installed correctly, make sure it's maintained. Plain and simple, okay? The pads that are in these are cheap, okay? Replace it once a year, okay? Whenever you get, every January, whenever you're doing your smoke detectors, replacing batteries, or whenever, if you do it at daylight savings, however you do it, just however you can remember, just order one of these. They're $14 or somewhere along that line. You can probably strike a deal on Amazon or whatever, but just replace that, okay? Last thing we want to do is see this thing full of mold causing you more issue than what it's there to solve. All in all, I think that's about it. I don't want to make this video too terribly long. I just kind of want to hit some of the highlights of humidification. Like I said, I'm going to film the process of installing this thing tomorrow, but that's really about it. So check out next time where who knows what we're going to get into. We're going to get into something. I think the next video is going to be on UV lights, because they go hand in hand. UV lights are great, because when we stick a UV light over an evaporator coil, now any potential for what these humidifiers are producing, that UV light just zaps it out. So let's have another video on that. Tune in next time. We'll take a look at the UV lights. But that's really about it in a nutshell for humidification. If you have any questions, feel free to call me directly, and we can come out, take a look, bring our psychrometer, see what your house is at right now, and how big of a unit we need. Okay. If we want to get you up to 50%, if we want to get you to 30%, and that's going to vary based on the time of the year. So that's it. Have fun.